Back at it with another Build Biology. This guy's in for, I think, it's third time now. If you keep building cool cars, you get to keep coming back. So, BC, what's up,
how are you, sir? Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Like, I need an office here. It's like my second home. It's
Just
awesome.
move in.
I should.
Yeah. What have you brought us today?
Something really special, something near and dear to my heart. This is the first Porsche I ever built in 2007. This thing is something I beat the crap on. Participated in rallies, canyon runs. I've taken it to a half mile. I've done crazy stuff with it. This is a beautiful 1975 Porsche 911. It is chock full of modern amenities.
Well, let's talk about the exterior. Let's start in the front.
Look at the front here. It has the look of the old school IROC Porsches. Yes, Porsche had an IROC series, International Race of Champions, and these were how all those cars looked racing at Riverside Raceway in the 70s.
Hours battling each other, and they're as hard-headed as anything. Pearson is off the track in the dirt. Allison's in the dirt.
They're both off the track, but they've kept it on. This is terrific. To be able to keep a car in this is great.
I have that very nice NA IROC look, but you notice the lights here. This is actually what is known as an H4R. H4 reimagined. And our friends from 911 Headlights did this. And what's really cool and what sets them apart is that they embed modern optics with a modern lens. That is a nice touch. That's elegant and also embedded in engineering, which I love, which is pretty cool. To make this car as slippery as possible, I got rid of the crazy, nasty flag mirrors.
Yeah.
And went with something with a nod to the old school air-cooled spiders. It's a little challenging to see out of, but it still does the job. And also has a Porsche history, but still give me a nice aerodynamic advantage, which is pretty cool. As we go across the top, I see I have, this car originally came with a sunroof, but of course I got rid of that. We actually cut from here and cut from there and put in the sunroof from a 911 that did not have a sunroof. More of an exterior, wheels. When you think of old Fuke wheels that Porsche had, this is a modern take on that. These are like some that Magnus Walker made extremely popular. These are outlaw wheels, courtesy of 1552. In the front, we have a beautiful 17x9. In the rear, we have a well-justified 17x11, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And wrapped around, of course, Toyo R888 rubber. This is a tail that is also reminiscent of the IROC series, but as you can see, we got a little naughty with the rear. We don't have any side skirts. It's just really clean, very IROC looking. And this is what is known as the bisimoto electric blue paint job, which is a nice electric blue or green. And has a
Brian, can you tell us what color this is?
but has a little nice purple hue to it, which is pretty cool. And that was made by our friends at CA Auto Works. They did a good job in making this paint job come to life. If you look at the original IROC series, this bumper has some Zeus fasteners on it that allows me to remove it very easily if I wanted to. But the old IROC had a little aperture here. This allowed for a cooler for the heat exchanger of the air-cooled engine. This feeds a different type of heat exchanger, but it doesn't hold oil. I'm giving too much away, huh?
Let's start from the cockpit. Let's talk about the interior.
For those of you who are really Porschephiles, you'll get to remember the RS America vehicles where it was really Porsche's take on a no-nonsense, bare-bones car that you can have fun on the weekends and also go to the track. Now, what's interesting is you pay a premium to remove AC and radios and make it very, very, very lightweight. There's an RS carpet kit that our friends from SOS Customs in Oceanside did a great job in laying into this beautiful interior of the 1975. And what you may see is that it's very thin, very lightweight, doesn't add much weight whatsoever. But of course, look at some of the other amenities. I have a very nice Momo Prototipo steering wheel. There's this shifter right here. For those of you who are Porsche guys, know that that's not a typical air-cooled shifter. Of course, we have these beautiful Momo seats, which are super cups on both the driver and passenger side, where it keeps you in place with some beautiful Momo harnesses, and these are all FIA approved, so you can make sure that you have great safety. Now, as we look at the gauge closer, I try to keep everything as factory as possible, but this is something that's a little bisimoto touch. That's 11,000 RPM tachometer. And this little pilot little switch here allows me to engage anti-lag whenever I want to have fun and shoot flames, which you may see on some of my Instagram and YouTube feeds. But above and beyond that, here's something I'm very proud of. This is an AEM serial gauge, which is embedded in a factory cluster, and it allows me to look at different parameters from wideband on one bank to wideband on the second bank. I can also look at simple things like the vacuum or boost, TPS, oil pressure, air temperature, and of course, water temperature as well. So that's pretty cool, keeping me always informed about how my engine is doing,
I
but
didn't even notice that when I
it looks
first
very
looked at
OEM.
it because it looks
very
so
factory,
OEM, yeah.
which is pretty cool. Now, as you look at the rear, which may be a little harder for you to see, I have an AEM EMS, which controls all my fuel and ignition parameters, and that harness was done very nicely with very easy disconnects by rye wire. Despite all the madness with the interior and making it look very pretty, of course, safety is very paramount. As you can see, it has these pretty cool NASCAR-style bars, and there's a proper 6-point cage to not only help with integrity of the car, but also does a great job in making sure that it looks really cool when you're driving up and down the boulevard. So it's very, very simple, very lightweight, and this car is lots of fun.
Speaking of the weight, how much does it weigh?
With me in it, and I'm a 200-pound guy, look at me, 2450.
That's with you in it?
That's with me in it. This is a frightening drive indeed.
Well, we got to get into it
By
now.
all means. Now, as you open this deck lid, you may expect to see a nice air-cooled fan here. As you can see, the aperture is devoid of such old-school technology. What we have in place of this is a water-cooled Porsche mill. Yes, a flat-six 3.4 liter out of the Porsche Carrera. It's known as the M96 variety engine. But as a typical building engineer and someone who likes to address challenges, I took care of all the shortcomings of this engine.
Wait,
So-
you a challenge? A challenge was for him? No way.
Yes. Take a look here. What really is on top of the entire engine is the very nice air-to-air intercooler courtesy of Turbonetics. They did a smashing job of manufacturing this in-house. We used a very nice coating on it that doesn't impede heat exchange, which is very important to keep the air intake temperatures cool, as the turbos tend to heat them up as they're compressed. You see this intake right there? That's from an X51 version of the M96 engine. I have some Vangean HD clamps courtesy of Vibrant, which allows me to keep boost where it belongs inside the engine and allows for some deflection, and this deflection allows things to move around very easily.
Yeah.
So I can have some deflection without any problems of losing boost. I don't have to worry about blowing up hoses or anything like that. I run 1000cc injectors on this. I don't think you can quite see that, but I also run a water methanol system with dual nozzles on this. So when I get into boost, I have a nice mist of 50-50 mixture of water, deionized water, and methanol go into the engine to keep things nice and safe. You see these lines right here, these braided hose lines from J&J? That is part of my cooling system that goes all the way to the front that allows me to run a nice heat exchanger that I alluded to earlier. Inside the block, it's fully sleeved. One of the challenges with this engine are people are so concerned about intermediate shaft bearing failures. I have an upgraded intermediate shaft in this. We run Trom pistons with custom bisimoto rods as well. And of course, the entire engine is lubricated by Purell 10W40 oil. These are dual 57-58 billet turbos from Turbonetics, filtered with AEM cone filters, covered with a dry flow pre-filter. And this is important because as you see, this is exposed.
Yes.
And as you can imagine, when I'm driving, I can get a lot of rubbish or a vortex forming here. This does a great job in really pre-filtering and allowing me to not get as much debris or any debris into the filter so it can do its job without impeding flow. All my hardware is courtesy of our friends from Vibrant. I love using their stainless steel hardware, I should say, and piping. This is a V-band style turbine housing, which is coated as well. And as you see, it's a little beat up because I drive the car.
How much power does it actually make?
So, actually says today 850 horsepower, which is amazing. 850 combined with 2,400 pounds of weight is a frightening adventure.
It's too much.
But no, sir. When I first built this car, I had twin 64mm turbos on this, and the thing almost killed me. It made over 1,000 horsepower, shut down my dyno, which shuts down about 1,100. I went for a spin behind this shop on a Saturday. Went to first, second, third gear floored it, nothing happened, and then boost came on. Car lifted up, and I hit it right for a tree. Got out of it, which you're not supposed to do in a Porsche, but I was so afraid. I got out of it, car slammed, settled down. I drove it to the back of the shop. When it cooled down, I took those turbos off. Went smaller.
All right, let's move on to the front.
Okay, so in what we refer to as a frunk, I'm such an engineer, so forgive me for not having pretty velour under here and so on and so forth, but this is my radiator. This is a shroud that does a great job in distributing air throughout the radiator as you drive. And you remember the aperture I talked about earlier?
Right.
This feeds, it has a nice opening here. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it feeds air and distributes it evenly across the radiator and is vacuated underneath. Then we have a custom tank, and this holds about 22 gallons, which is pretty nice.
And what
I have
fuel?
a vent tank, just 91.
91.
So if you remember, I have 91 with water methanol. So that's an AEM water methanol kit. And the great thing about this is when I get to about 3 PSI of boost, the AEM system pumps through 2 nozzles a nice atomized mist of water methanol and allows me to keep detonation at bay, allows me to make more power, more boost, and even have more timing. So it's awesome. And if it fails, if something goes wrong with the system or my tank gets empty, there's a sensor right there that sends a signal to my AM EMS, and I programmed it in such a way that there's a fail-safe. It gives me a boost cut or rev cut whenever that's empty. It takes me about a couple hundred miles to empty that.
Really?
Yeah, even me driving crazy.
You're
So it's
answering
pretty nice.
every question that
Thank
I have
you.
in my head.
Thank you.
So
And
that's
this
quite
pigtail
good.
thing is my little crude way of, let's say my car topples over, the minuteness of the fuel could be lower than this tube that goes all the way outwards. My fuel will not spew out of it. So it'll keep me safe and not have fuel all over the place, which is pretty nice. So this is a little old school take from a fighter jet, and that's where I put my fuel in, which is pretty cool.
wow.
She's a lot of fun. I'm a huge advocate of old school Porsches, old school cars, but I love new technology. So this is a perfect way to merge new technology with an old school look.
Well, I know there's stuff to talk about with suspension and brakes and
Yes.
everything else because that's peeking through, but we're gonna have to get that on the list.
Sounds good. We can
let's-
throw it in the lift and see what happens.
Let's throw it on. So now we get to see all the dirty underside of it.
Yeah, and you
that
know what?
is a result of you driving it around.
Typically, I'd apologize, but I'm not going to this time. I drive the crap out of this. So this is years of just rubbish. And then you can even see my own, I'm not gonna wire you. This is my own wiring, that's me wiring. But you know what? This is a hall sensor that I use to pick up speed off of the nubs on the axle. And those engines in that Carrera would have speed sensors on ABS, on the wheel sensors. Since it's an older chassis, it didn't have that advantage. So I had to do something very creative to get that going. And as you can see that we had some very nice, so we have this from Vibrant. This is some Schedule 10 piping with a proper merge collector to a Turbonetics wastegate on each side. I have individual O2 sensors going to each bank as well to give me very good closed loop feedback, so my tuning is absolutely impeccable. Inside this pseudo wet sump system is a very nice setup that allows you to keep oil in the sump area, so when you're doing any extreme driving or cornering, you don't starve the engine for oil. I talked a little bit about the end tanks that we see in seed or drip tanks.
Sure.
You can see the venting right there, but it goes into the drip tank and then it's fed to this Y, and then this scavenge pump, turbo scavenge pump, allows me to pull away from those gravity-fed tanks and go right back up into the cylinder head right there. These are bisimoto eyeball coilovers, very dirty because years and years of driving. The body itself is attached to the frame, to the chassis, and the heavier part stays there, so the lightweight bits are now on the banana arm, so you don't have a lot of weight being transferred to the wheel assembly. This is the big gearbox from a 997 that we have, which is pretty massive. And as you can see, it has some cable actuation going inside the chassis as well. As we go along the lines of all the dirt and years of grime, you can see some really interesting things going on here. This is a master cylinder that's used to actuate the brakes. We have pretty large brake assemblies from Centric. That's a sister company of StopTech. As you look at the suspension.
So you said
bits
this
as well,
was Mercedes part.
that's a Mercedes part. This is actually
was
from 190.
modified.
It's a larger one. The factory portion one from this old 75 was too small, so that master wouldn't allow me to actuate these larger brakes. It actually went to the floor. So we had to get with a larger master to allow me to actuate those. And yeah, it's not boosted. For those of you who keep asking me about boosted brakes, it's mechanical.
Stomp on it.
Or lean on it a little
That's
bit.
the only thing that would scare me right there. Any debris on the track, no brakes.
Well, you know what? Good point. So this is my steering arm assembly, and if I left this steering arm in the factory location, I'd get what is known as bump steer. Whenever you hit a bump, the car wants to steer one way or the other. By using these spacers on this arm, it allows me to have an even assembly when it comes to the steering arm, and therefore when I hit a bump, it kind of just stays as is. It doesn't steer the car.
Yeah.
Left or right. Moving forward, inside here, I don't know if you can see this, I have a sump for the tank, and I have this shield, this heat shield, that protects the AM pump right there, which you can see right there. Now, what's interesting is I have this shield because my fan is right here, and remember that cooling system we had earlier?
Ducting it down.
Yes, it ducts all the heat down, and I kind of want to reject it away from it. So air is a great insulator, so putting this shield and having air between the pump and that heat does a great job at keeping heat away from the pump's externals, which is pretty nice. And when it comes to sway bars, I have something pretty decent in the front, but the rear has one.
I was gonna say,
which
I
is
saw
pretty
this.
robust. This is really nice, and that's a very nice racing piece. Tarrant Engineering made this for us, which is pretty nice. Has a nice old school Porsche vibe to it, but it's also fully adjustable. Inside this assembly, you can't see it at all, but there's an aluminum flywheel that is very lightweight. It allows me for a quicker spool. and also much better acceleration. It can also fall out of boost quickly, so you have to drive pretty nicely.
Now with the axles, are these factory?
Yes, these are factory axles, and these came from the Carrera as well.
And they can support this much power, no
yeah,
problem.
you know what's weird? Porsche CVs are very, very robust. So you hear things like 911 or 935 CVs. Drag racers tend to use these as upgrades when they're out there racing. Even road race, off-road guys tend to turn to 935, 911
Well,
CVs.
now I'm going to
or
have to
930
consider
CVs.
that.
This is really robust. Everything that you see in the modern cars on this, knock sensing with closed loop function for that through AEM, so that if I'm ever driving a hot day or driving an opportunity where I have very bad fuel and my engine starts pinging, the EC will see that and add fuel and retard timing automatically based upon a protocol I put in the system. I'm all about safety and reliability, and that's why this engine that most people don't think is exciting, with the right tuning and right components, you can make it quite robust.
Yeah.
And have a lot of fun enjoying the car as well.
This is a beautiful car.
Thank you, and she's a lot of fun.
And I love that you get to rip on it. BC, again, very good work.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here. I appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Always, I'm sure
More
you're
to
going to be
come.
back.
I have many more to bring.
He's got so much.
So much more.
All right, next week on Bisimoto.
On Bisimology. That thing is solid. This is solid German metal there. Look at that. Look at that.